I head up our civic and community engagement team. It wouldn't be a community engagement team without community members on it. So we have some wonderful folks in the room tonight who have been helping us out with so many programs. And if you wouldn't mind, if you are on that committee, please just raise your hand. Awesome. So I see Amy towards the back. Karen is towards the front. And Linda's also towards the front. I think that Denise is just walking in. She's on the team as well. And these are folks who, one of their roles tonight will be that they will be taking your questions. We're asking you to write your questions on an index card and make sure you put, I want to ask this about question 2 or 4 or what have you. And then we'll get those to our moderator, and she will ask them of our speakers. Okay. One of the other things that we have for you tonight is a chance to register to vote out in the hallway. And so please, if you don't know where you vote, if you moved and you need to update it, or if you just want to make sure you're on the rolls, really important thing to do, please check with the folks from the Board of Elections. Our Elections Commissioner, Gladys Oyola, is also part of this team. We're excited to have some sponsorship from a new member of the team. Ellen is here with us. Ellen, would you raise your hand? She's also taking index cards from you. And she is here representing the Women's Fund of Western Massachusetts. And many graduates of the Women's Fund program, LIPI, are in the room tonight. So if you're a LIPI graduate, Leadership Institute for Public, and, we have current LIPI students too. Leadership Institute for Political and Public Impact. So many of us are graduates, and one of the ways that we live that is by organizing events like this. It is possible that some of your questions will be a follow-up question to the microphone, and you will notice that FOCUS Springfield, our community's public access station, is recording this evening. If you do come to the microphone, don't shy away from that, because they will not be filming your face. The back of your head may show, but they will not be filming your face. So please don't let that discourage you from taking asking a question. Please raise your hand when you have a question that you want one of the committee members to take up to the moderator. I wanted to quickly introduce to you Anthony Soto. He is here tonight from the Secretary of State's office, and he just has a couple of words for us about how a question actually gets on the ballot. And then we'll get rolling with our program right after that, and that will be with our moderator, Shannon Rudder, who's seated in front of you. And we got some woo-woos in the house for Shannon. And she will be making sure that we move along, but that your questions get asked and answered as well. And she'll tell you a little bit more about that too. So thank you so much, all of you, whether you're a voter, thinking about voting, or you come to the library all the time, or this is your first time here. We're so happy to have you here. And please also, FOCUS Springfield. They have some nice popcorn for us over here on the side. So we have some woo-woos for that too. All right, I would like to invite Anthony to the microphone.
It's still afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony Soto. I'm a field representative for the Secretary of State, William Francis Galvin. I have an office here. We're located at 436 Dwight Street at the State Building. And we're here to serve you, all of Western Mass. We cover Western Mass. We have 3 offices throughout the state. We have another one in Fall River, and then the one in Boston. This office here is here to serve you, and I would hope, I know many faces here have used it already, so just you're welcome to please, and I apologize that already for that. So right now, thank you to the Springfield Library for having us here, and this is something that the Secretary encourages more of civic duty for one to do across the state, and to keep individuals informed of what's going on. It's really important, especially this time of year for voting. I mean, we have a presidential really, can I say active? Active presidential election going on right now as we speak. But with that, we hope that people's attention doesn't turn away and realize that there are 4 very important questions on the ballot. What we have to, and also for those, I want to say I see neighbor, I see some other folks out here that do some really great work in getting people out to the polls and registering. What we see a lot, though, too, and across the state, we really encourage you to emphasize on the folks the importance of answering the questions on for the ballots, yes or no, or whatever. A lot we see, I've seen throughout the state where they'll fill out the ballot, especially if it's on the backside. I apologize. People don't turn the ballots over, and that just, yeah, it's a waste. I call it a wasted vote, and we don't want to waste any votes. So currently there are 4 questions on the ballot. If you guys, there's expanding slot machine gaming, a charter school expansion, and conditions for farm animals, and last but not least, legalization of regulation and taxation of marijuana. Again, all these questions will affect us in one way or another, and it's really important to stay engaged and be involved. You folks that are here today, I'm preaching to the choir, but when you do speak to folks about how important it is that their vote really does matter and that every single vote does count, that's something really to emphasize. Again, in order to get on a question on a ballot, it's got to be so many, the percentage of folks for those certain areas, or if it's a statewide. I don't know all the numbers. I'm not going to, how exactly the numbers are for these certain questions right here, but for certain districts, and we have them on our website, we have an expert that does this all the time. I'm just covering for him right now on that sense. But and you could always visit our website, at the Secretary of State's website, for any information regarding any of the questions, how they do come about. Also, too, our office located here, it's a 413 number. It's 413-784-1376, and we're always available from 8:15 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. We do encourage, again, if our office, I might say this too, if you see where there's a group of individuals or something that need to register to vote, we make sure that we have enough ballots at all times. I'm sorry, not the ballots. We make sure we have enough voter registration forms. We have them in Spanish, English, Chinese. We have them in many Russian. We have them in all different languages. There is no excuse for someone to say they don't understand what's on the ballot to register to vote. So, and depending on where you live, the ballots are also bilingual. I believe Springfield already has Spanish and English. Am I right? Yeah, and Holyoke, and yeah, okay. All right, so any questions or
I think
we're
not.
Okay.
I'm not sure if Mr. Soto can stay with us or not tonight.
No, we're unfortunately I'm going to a wake in Boston. That's yeah. So yeah, a good man, Steve Thompson's wife passed away. She's a sheriff in Middlesex County, so we're headed out there. Again, I gave my office. Any individual here would like to speak to me privately or at any time. Again, we're at the Springfield office. You're more than welcome to stop in. And thank you very much. And really, I get excited when I see these types of groups getting together and stuff and getting engaged. The importance of getting people elected and also of getting questions passed or not passed, whatever someone wants to do. So stay engaged. Thank you all, and have a great night. Thank you for having me. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Anthony. Yep. Thank you, Anthony, and completely understandable why you're not able to stay with us. Please raise your hand if you have questions that you want to have posed, and our committee members will come and either give you a card to write it down or collect your card and bring it up to the moderator. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Shannon Rudder. And she's going to tell you a little bit more about herself than I've already done, but she's going to be our moderator for the evening. through questions 1 through 4. And then Linda O'Connell, who is a board member with League of Women Voters of Massachusetts, will take over and moderate question 5. And please come on up, Shannon.
Hello, all. Can we get some energy in here? There we go, there we go. All right, so I am Shannon Rudder. I am the executive director of Mother Woman, which is a nonprofit that is, thank you, committed to equipping communities and providers with resources to fully support mothers and also to empower and support mothers to realize their own inherent resilience. I am also a recent graduate of LIPI, which is a program of dynamic women of the Women's Fund of Western Mass, and I am proud to say that I am a resident of the great city of Springfield. So I am here with you just to engage you all. You really are the ones that are asking the questions. They're just coming through my voice. So please, please, please make sure that your voice is heard by asking the questions and sharing them on an index card. And don't ever stop asking them because they're important. So how things are gonna work. We're gonna get to hear I'll read the question, the ballot question. We'll get to hear from folks that are for passage of the ballot question and folks that are proposing not, that are gonna say no to voting for the ballot question. And then I'll entertain your questions for about 10 minutes. So that's about 15 minutes per question. And so, as Jean has indicated, I will do questions 1 through 4, and then I'll invite my comrade, Linda O'Connell, up to conclude our time together. A little bit more is that we do have some timekeepers, Karen and Linda, and if you see a green, that means you're okay, keep going. If you see a yellow, that means, what are we saying, a minute? 1 minute left, so please wrap up any of your thoughts. And red, they're gonna cut us off. And because we really do wanna honor all of our time together tonight. So, how does that sound? Sound good? Again, we're participatory here. All right. Okay, so then let's begin. So I would love to have with me, and please don't take offense, Stephen. Tell me your last name. Abdow. It's actually phonetic. Please come and join me. So Stephen Abdow is a member of No on Number 1 committee and the CFO of the Episcopal Diocese of Western Mass. And we're going to hear from Stephen. And so I'll read the question. The ballot question reads, expanding slot machine gaming. A yes would allow a second slot parlor to exist in Suffolk County, Massachusetts, which is about an hour and a half away. The 2011 gambling law currently allows for up to 3 resort casinos and 1 slot parlor. The slot parlor license is owned by Penn National Gaming, which operates Plain Ridge Park Casino in Plainville. So at this point, you're uncontested. You're going to tell us why we shouldn't vote for passage of ballot question 1.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm encouraging you to vote no on question 1. This is not a question about yes or no on casinos. We've already had that. We have a casino here in Springfield being built, can't miss it, and there's 2 other casinos being built in Massachusetts, and a slots parlor is already open. That was referred to. This is an attempt by actually a single individual to get another slots parlor licensed in Suffolk County. The language of that question is so specific that there's only one potential location, and that is adjacent to the Suffolk Downs racetrack, but it's not mentioned in the proposal. It's kind of sneaky, quite frankly. And the basic opposition is that we have just passed legislation or following up on past legislation to have 4 establishments in Massachusetts. We have the lottery. There's a saturation in the marketplace, according to the Wall Street Journal and other measures, with casinos in Maine and Rhode Island, Connecticut. And let's let the dust settle before we consider another slots parlor. Maybe it would be a good thing, we'll find out in a number of years, that there's more market capacity and there's more potential tax revenue for the state and whatnot. But there's no support for this. The proponents, who are all from outside the state, the man who's funding this thing single-handedly lives in Thailand. He claims to be a Massachusetts resident, but and we're talking about Revere, Mass, where they have approved gambling casino. They've shown approval for casinos, but all of their leaders in the state, in the city, are opposed to this proposal. Supposedly, the promise is to save the horse racing industry, to provide tax revenues for the state, and provide money for education in the host city. So the CEO of the Suffolk Downs Racetrack says, we have not and do not plan to support this. The horse track is not interested in this legislation. Secondly, the governor and the Speaker of the House, who put this legislation through, do not support this. Governor Baker explains his opposition by saying, I've always thought we should be mindful of the fact that we don't exactly know what the consequences and the impact of all this is going to be. When the dust settles on the lottery and on a whole bunch of other things, let's wait and see what happens before raising the possibility of yet another facility in Massachusetts. Eminently reasonable. Third, the proposal has not earned the support of a single elected official in Revere to date. Revere leaders, including their state senator, their city rep, a number of city councilors, and the entire school committee and the school superintendent have been unified in opposing this proposal. Third, this proposal, the market's saturated. There's one slots parlor in Massachusetts. They're significantly underperforming. They opened with expectations of doing $300 million in revenues. In the first year, they did a little more than half that, 160. So we have 4 places that are going to be entering the marketplace, and we don't want to dilute those places. We want them to be successful. Additionally, the proponents have not been forthcoming about who they are or how they're funded. The group is telling us nothing about any track record that they have developing gaming entities. The one ballot question committee has received $600,000 in contributions from one source, a Delaware-based corporation which provides no information about who they are or what they do. And the people pushing this initiative are not being upfront about their track record. The opposition has raised $5,000. They've raised $600,000 from one source. So it's too early to grant another license, and the track record is unproven. Vote no. I have a brochure up, a flyer up there with any more details. Thank you. We are recommending a no vote on question 1. This vote has not received a lot of attention in this part of the state. I encourage you to spread the word. No on 1. We'll wait to expand gambling until we see how the initial casinos do.
So oftentimes we in this part of the state, Western Mass, feel a little bit forgotten or isolated. Can you talk about how passage of this ballot question really impacts us here in Western Mass?
Well, I do think there's a limited market, and I mean, I don't know if people would not come to MGM because there's a slots parlor in Revere, but it's really impacting the legislation, the whole process, and I think that this is very important to the city of Springfield. Actually, the legislation on gambling, and the Gaming Commission hasn't opined. It would come through them, but I think we want to keep the intent of the legislature intact, and that's and we are, of course, have a large role having one of the 2 casino licenses granted to this city.
And so what are some of the documented social costs as a result of a casino coming to neighborhoods in the last 5 years?
Well, I do know, I don't think casinos are a great idea for economic development or for communities. I do know that proximity does matter, that people nearby do get affected negatively. I know that there is a potential tax revenue and that it's a good source of entertainment, but I also know that there's saturation in this market, and we know that say in Springfield, they want to open a casino on 91 in Hartford to compete, to keep money from going to Connecticut, the Indian casinos. There are negative social impacts that are well documented in terms of the percentage of people. Much of the revenues of casinos do come from people with gambling problems, but a lot of ways that is, we've already kind of had that debate, and so, but I do think proximity matters, and more casinos wouldn't be helpful in terms of the social fabric.
At this point, are there any other questions for Steve? Okay, thank you very much. So, as I'm going to read ballot question number 2, I invite to join me Rachel Romano, who is the founder and executive director of Veritas Prep Charter School. Rachel is a proponent of passage of this ballot question. And then I will also invite Jake Oliveira. Did I say that right? All right. Who's the president of Massachusetts Association of School Committees. And so the ballot questions, just so we're all clear, is an act to allow fair access to public charter school expansion. The question, if approved, would let state education officials approve up to 12 new charter schools a year. And so I'll ask Rachel if you would tell us why you... Come on.
Up there? Sure. Okay. Sorry. Start my timer. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'd like to start by saying that I was a teacher in the Springfield Public Schools for 6 years, and I founded Veritas. I assembled a team to do that because I truly believed that all of the students in our school were capable of achieving at far higher levels than they were. And the school was founded in that belief. They are. Our students have been extraordinarily successful compared to their peers, and we need more schools like that here in Springfield and Holyoke. So this ballot question is about access and equity. It is about providing equal access to quality public schools in the districts that need them most, like Springfield and like Holyoke. Over the past 20 years, charter schools have filled this need for quality public schools in Massachusetts in our urban districts. So charters are required to administer all of the same assessments to their students, and they're held to incredibly high expectations and accountability standards. We must be better than our sending districts. It's the expectation that we raise the bar. Sadly, 50% of the children in Massachusetts who are in urban districts are attending an underperforming school. That number is closer to 100% in Springfield. And many of these schools have been failing for decades. So in contrast, 0% of the children, none of the children who are attending charter schools in urban districts in Massachusetts are attending an underperforming school. Every urban charter school is a level 1 or level 2 school. Yet growth of charter schools is limited by an arbitrary cap that leaves more than 30,000 students on waiting lists, and we have more than 3,000 students on waiting lists here in Springfield. Maybe we can afford to wait, but these children cannot. These quality public school options can provide choice for these families who need it, for children who would be zoned to a failing school, and for children who will not achieve in spite of their school, who need good schools. There are a lot of scare tactics out there, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about what this ballot question, if passed, will do and what it will not do. So what it will do, it will allow, not demand, not command, but allow the Board of Education the flexibility to approve the expansion of existing schools like Veritas or new charter schools in communities that have reached their cap, provided that the school district is among the lowest 25% in the state. So if there is need in a community and there is demand in a community, and if the application is strong enough to get through the rigorous process in our state, then it would allow the flexibility to increase up to 12 new schools or expansions a year, 12. The focus is on districts where the schools are failing, and all of the charter school laws and regulations that currently make our charter schools the best in the nation will stay in place. What it will not do, it will not authorize 12 schools opened anywhere at any time by anyone. And this ballot question will not open the floodgates for new charter schools. There are currently 70 in the state, and on average 4 are approved each year. So there are never 12 being approved each year anyway. But this would allow some flexibility in districts that need it for some more quality school options for families. So the ballot question is about providing choice to families who can't pick up and move to the suburbs where the schools are better. It's about equity and access to quality public schools. It's about making a public education the equalizer that it should be. And it's about providing a basic civil rights for our most underserved kiddos in the state. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Shannon, and thank you, Rachel. I know your advocacy and your passion about this subject is very evident in the way you speak on behalf of it, so thank you for joining us. My name is Jake Oliveira. I am president of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. It represents over 300 school committees across Massachusetts, as well as many different types of schools, including vocational, technical education schools here in the Commonwealth. We have over 2,000 members, and we represent the hundreds of thousands of students that are enrolled right now in our public schools. The ballot question at hand that I think has generated quite a lot of energy and discussion throughout Massachusetts really comes down to, as Rachel had mentioned before, equity. But I'd also add another piece on it, accountability. On the equity side, funding continues to be one of the greatest challenges for our public schools. Most recently, the Chapter 70 Foundation Budget Commission recommended that nearly $2 billion needs to be invested in our public schools in order to get us to an adequately level playing field for the children of Massachusetts. That $2 billion has nothing to do with this question before us tonight. I know that many of you have seen some of the advertisements that have been on TV where a very grandfatherly voice comes on and says, charter schools means expansion, or question 2 means more money for public schools. I can tell you, it might as well be Donald Trump saying that, because it is absolutely false. This question has nothing to do with funding. This question has to do with raising a cap that's placed upon our charter schools right now that is draining important tax dollars away from our public schools in Massachusetts. Let me just give you a brief example. So I'm from over across the bridge in Ludlow, where we send, out of our 2,800 student district, about 20 students last year to public charter schools here in the Springfield area. That costs our district close to $400,000 a year for a classroom filled with students. As the Yes on 2 side had mentioned in the past, the state does reimburse districts for a certain percentage of that amount that is taken away from the local school district. For Ludlow, that's a little bit over $100,000, meaning that we're left with a $300,000 hole for a classroom filled with students, and they're not just in one grade. So you can't simply, cut a position here or cut a position there. The districts need to absorb that. You want to talk about the impact on an urban school district like right here in Springfield or Boston, tack on a few extra zeros to that $300,000, and that's the impact to our public schools in a lot of our urban areas. The funding issue is essential to this question, but it is not the only issue that we have with it. The second very important issue that we have is dealing with accountability. Charter schools do not operate as traditional public schools do, where their dollars that come in are managed by locally elected school committee members like myself and people that the community put on there to be their voices. They have boards of trustees that are held accountable to no one. Their boards of trustees are held accountable to themselves and once in a while to the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. We need here in Massachusetts to hold these charter schools accountable. We've talked about reforms. We've talked about reforms in order to raise the cap. However, the charter school industry does not want to come to the table to discuss that at all. We've talked about it. We've been leading the way for change, and we find that it is not a right move to raise a cap right now. We also feel another issue that's about it is looking at who are the supporters of question 2 and who are the opponents. The NAACP of New England is against question 2. The NAACP chapter right here in Springfield and Boston and Worcester are all against chapter 2 right now. Over 170 school committees here in Massachusetts have acted and taken a no vote. Can you guess how many actually voted to support question 2? 0. Many city councils, many mayors, many elected officials have taken positions against this, and also Mayor Walsh of Boston, who was a charter school proponent and helped found a charter school, is against this question. If you want to talk about it a little bit more, we can talk about it, but I think my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you both. What passion. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions. Oh, thank you. The first is, can you describe the oversight charters have by their local school committees? Rachel, I'll give you that.
Thank you. So charter schools, the deal with charter schools is they're given high levels of autonomy with high accountability. So this idea that they're not accountable is totally untrue. So the Board of Education, first of all, approves the charter through a very rigorous process. And the governing body is a board of trustees, and they are all volunteers, and they are all from this community, or the community wherever the charter school is. And those people are considered in-kind employees of the state. So they are required to produce conflict of interest statements and all sorts of other, go through trainings, and they are overseen by the Board of Elementary and Secondary Ed, not once in a while, but consistently throughout every year. The Board of Elementary Ed sends a team of visitors to our school, to any charter school, every single year, does a site visit. The schools are required to have an independent audit firm come in and do an audit. So the regulations and oversight over charter schools are far greater than any district school I've ever worked in, is the truth. But yeah, it's a system outside of the big system that controls public education. So it's a huge threat, and it's something different that school committees don't have control over. So that's really scary.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to direct all of you to look at an Annenberg study that looked at the boards of trustees of the charter schools here in Massachusetts. 60% of charter school boards don't have a single parent representation on them from that district, 60%. There are charter schools, and if you look at the study recently done within the city of Boston to look at the boards of trustees of those charter schools, it actually showed on there that a majority of those trustees didn't come from the city of Boston. They didn't come from parents that are part of that public school system or have a vested interest in their community. They came from suburbs like Weston and Wellesley and other areas that are outside of the actual Boston school system. And if you look here at Springfield, you can look at the very boards of trustees that are here. I can bet you any amount of money that the amount of people from Longmeadow, the amount of people that from Hamden, and maybe even a few people from Ludlow sit on those boards. And very few of them actually represent the community. As a school committee member who actually, fields calls from parents, that fields calls from a lot of people within the community, not having parent representation or having a voice on there of the governing board that a parent could call up, that a parent could say, listen, this is what's happening with my child, I feel really is against the foundation of what we've built for education in this country, which is about making sure that local decision-making, local choices, local involvement bubbles up into the public school system. I think it's the foundation of our democracy. And when you have these public charter schools that are out there that are operating with a board of trustees that doesn't reflect the community, then I feel, we're really not representing the true democratic process of education that we've established for hundreds of years.
So the funding follows the students. Just like any other school choice option for families, the funding follows the students. So the state allocates a certain amount of money for every public school student in Massachusetts, and that money goes to that student's district or school. And it works the same way with charter schools. The only difference actually with charter schools is that because of the strong opposition from teachers' unions and school committees and the system that exists right now, it was negotiated into the charter school law that the districts would be reimbursed. So unlike, school choice in other ways, when a child goes to a charter school, the district gets reimbursed. And for 6 years. So for the first year, 100% of the tuition goes to the district, though the child doesn't. The child goes to a charter school. And for 5 more years, the district, so 6 total years, 100% the first year, and 25% for 5 more years. So we have students who graduated from our 8th grade last year and who are freshmen at SciTech or Commerce or Central right now, in honors and AP classes, by the way, on a path to college, where the district is still being reimbursed for those children, and they're not at Veritas, they're at Central High School, so the district is getting 100% of their tuition for being 9th graders at Central, and still getting a reimbursement for having attended a charter school. So, there is some loss of funding, I get that, I understand, what you're describing, but it was certainly exaggerated, and the money should go with the child.
Is the amount spent per child the same for out-of-district as sending the students to charters? It is to a certain extent. So I would like to correct a little bit of something that Rachel had just said. It is true that we do get funding reimbursement at the local district level, but the last time it was fully funded by the Commonwealth it's been 5 years. So most districts are only paying out right now in that first year of funding what they're actually getting for reimbursement rates. Hence the gap that we have in Ludlow, hence the $450 million gap we have here throughout the many districts in the Commonwealth. When it comes to actual students, the money following the students, let's just say the cost doesn't follow the student as well. The cost is borne by the district every time a student leaves the district for something else. I'll give a perfect example of one way in which we pay tuitions out. We send students to vocational technical high schools here in Massachusetts. Those vocational technical high schools are paid for in part by the sending district, sending tuition payments to that school. Right here in Springfield, we have the METGO program, but like the charter school issue, the state does kick in some reimbursement dollars for that. But as far as the vocational schools and as far as the METGO program is concerned, it gets back to that accountability piece. Each one of those schools has a board that's elected that represents the community of that sending district. So that is not the case with the charter schools and the reimbursement and the funding for it. When the student follows on over, the accountability from that local district, from local oversight, goes out the window.
Thank you. So I have in front of me, Rachel Romano stated that there are no underperforming charter schools. What would she say, Rachel, about the 2 in Springfield that had their charters revoked because they were failing? Go ahead.
I would say true that. They had their charters revoked because they weren't performing. Absolutely, and this is the difference. See, I worked at a district school that chronically underperforming for decades. I think at one point it was one of the worst in the state. That school is still open, and it's still one of the worst in the state. And it is 10 years later. Those charter schools you're talking about in Springfield, it's kind of sad that 2 did close in Springfield, but they closed because they weren't doing the right things. That doesn't happen with our district schools. And, I have to defend my board a little bit. They're local people. We have parents on our board. I don't know about the schools in Boston and what the report said, but it does bring control really local to the school level. And in a way that when I was a teacher in a district school, control and decisions were not made at the school level. They weren't made for the students who sat in front of us or for the parents who sent them to us every single day. They weren't. They were made by a central office that made those decisions, and it was a very compliance-driven environment. It didn't work for kids. It doesn't work for kids, and that's the reality. So if we're talking about serving children, and if we're talking about doing right by the thousands of children that we're failing every single year here in Springfield and in Holyoke, then we have to think a little differently about what's happening.
Thank you. I'd love to, as Jake, you come up, I would love to ask this question. Do you think it is fair that special percentages in charter schools are much lower than public schools?
I think it, but I'd like to answer that, but I want to go back to that question before to talk about actual accountability. And it is assessment is something that we talk about before. I don't know how most people assess things, but I don't just simply look at a standardized test score on how someone performs on the MCAS test or a new park on there. What I look at is persistent rates over time. I look at the attrition rates when they go to college, the percentage of students that are taking remedial courses once they enter one of our community colleges or state universities. And actually there is in the MIT report that I know that the charter schools have cited before, it looks into that a bit, and it looks at the persistent rates and the graduation rates of college after from sending districts and from charter schools. And there's very little difference in the success rates of students who attend a charter school versus a local public school. So I think the difference in there is not so much, it's much more on the standardized test side rather than on the actual success side of our students over time. But getting back to the question that you just read, could you read it again for me, please?
Sure. Do you think it is fair that special percentages in charter schools are much lower than public schools?
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
Yep, and you know what, and Rachel will come up here and she'll say that her charter schools and charter schools across Massachusetts reflect the sending district's percentage of ELL students, the same percentage of students that might have a disability. However, the severity is very different. The public schools right now are literally locked in with the most severe students with the most severe needs. You know, you can have, you know, defining a student of disabilities is a large spectrum. You can have a slight learning disability, or you could have some very severe disabilities that require a one-on-one educator per student. The districts, unfortunately, particularly in the highly urbanized districts that have large populations of students with disabilities, the difference between those students is vast. And it seems that the charter schools find themselves with students with lower level disabilities rather than the public schools who have the much more needy students that they have to educate. The other difference I would like to say on there is dealing with mobile and transient students. You know, students get on a lottery to go into a charter school right now. Mobile and transient students that are affected right here in the city of Springfield and in Holyoke and throughout the Pioneer Valley, they're not reflected in any statistic, but everybody who's been in a classroom understands how difficult it is to educate one of those students. And the public students, the public schools are the schools where those students are being housed right now because they come in sometimes mid-year without the adequate resources that are necessary. And so our teachers are struggling with that.
Thank you very much. So we are out of time for that particular question. We do have two other questions that have been posed, and I would love to ask that both of you, if you can, stay so that folks can be able to speak with you more about this topic. The other thing that I would like to address is that we do, someone said, I am a board member of a charter school, and I would just like to say that for the sake of time, we're not gonna pass the mic, so really use the index cards for questions, but stay to have discussion about these important questions. Thank you both. Okay, moving right along. So question number 3 on the ballots is conditions for farm animals. And I would love to invite Stephanie Harris forward. Hi, Stephanie. Campaign Director for Yes on 3, and Diane Sullivan, Campaign Manager with Citizens Against Food Tax Injustice, forward. The ballot question reads, this question, well, it doesn't read. The question, if approved, would phase out any advocates would phase out what advocates say are extreme methods of farm animal confinement. And so I would invite Stephanie Harris up to say why yes on 3.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Harris, and I'm the Massachusetts State Director with the Humane Society of the United States, as well as the Campaign Director for Yes on 3. Question 3 is a modest measure on November's ballot. It would finally establish common sense rules for farm animals, because there are currently no rules regarding how farm animals can be confined. So this will establish common sense protections for farm animals that are suffering some of the worst abuses and protect Massachusetts families from contaminated food. In the absence of rules, there are some within the agribusiness industry that will cut corners and cram animals into cages that are too small for them to move. They can barely turn around or extend their limbs. Consider, for example, a female pig in a pork factory farm. She's locked in a crate essentially the same size as her body. She can take one step forward, one step back. She certainly can't turn around. She's essentially living in a coffin for her entire life. Like your cat or dog at home, pigs are highly intelligent and social animals, and so with no stimulation, she essentially loses her mind. She bites maniacally at the bars in front of her face, often knocking teeth out and drawing blood that stains the concrete at her feet. Eventually, these pigs, they give up hope. They give up. Veterinarians call it learned helplessness, and they just stare through the bars in front of their cage. And imagine if we treated dogs this way. This type of abuse is common in the pork industry, the egg industry, as well as the veal industry. And question 3 would require that products produced or sold in Massachusetts meet this modest animal welfare standard and food safety standard of being sure that they can stand up, lie down, turn around, and extend their limbs. And this measure is also about food safety. A few years ago, a Massachusetts girl was sickened by salmonella. It was an outbreak that was linked to 2 Iowa egg factories. It was an outbreak that sickened an additional 50,000 other Americans. Those facilities were owned by a man named Jack DeCoster. And in a rare instance of a CEO being held accountable, DeCoster was sentenced to jail time. Nonetheless, the Humane Society documented egregious cruelty and food safety threats at another DeCoster facility, this time one closer to home, a facility in Maine that supplies eggs to Massachusetts. They found hens that were forced to live and lay eggs for human consumption on the rotting carcasses of their deceased cage mates. They also found poisoned rats in the cages with hens. Factory farms are incubators for disease due to stressful, overcrowded, and unhygienic conditions. And extensive research shows that these cage facilities have significantly higher rates of salmonella than their cage-free counterparts. Salmonella is the leading cause of food poisoning-related death in America today, which is why the Center for Food Safety and Consumer Federation for America join more than 100 Massachusetts family farmers and more than 500 Massachusetts veterinarians in endorsing a yes vote on question 3. Our opponents talk about price, and the reality is that study after study shows that it will cost 1 to 2 pennies more to shift to cage-free production rather than using this cruel cage confinement. And that's the reason that some of the most cost-conscious companies out there have already pledged to go 100% cage-free. Dollar General, Dollar Tree, Walmart, Taco Bell, even McDonald's, probably the company that's most known for keeping their prices low. But we don't need to look at what the studies show or what McDonald's is planning to do. We can look at what's actually happened in California, which implemented a similar animal welfare and food safety reform a couple of years ago. And today, the egg prices in California are on par with the national average. And in fact, earlier this summer, they dipped below the national average. The bottom line is that Massachusetts families deserve better than a 2-tiered food safety system where low-income people are more likely to be threatened by substandard, inhumane, and unsafe products. Animals deserve to be able to engage in basic movement. If you agree, please vote yes on question 3.
Thank you. I want to thank our hosts here this evening. I also want to acknowledge I saw a Neighbor to Neighbor t-shirt in the room. I have worked in partnership with Neighbor to Neighbor in Boston for over a decade on working on affordable housing issues, so I'm always happy to see a Neighbor to Neighbor shirt. Oh, I see you back there. All right, and so as we all know, Massachusetts continues to be one of the most expensive states in the country in which to live. While 784,000 of our neighbors rely on public supports to feed themselves and their families, we now have a DC special interest group here in Massachusetts working really hard to steal away affordable choices, our most basic affordable sources of proteins from our plates. Question 3 is, in fact, a social injustice issue that will victimize low and middle income households across Massachusetts, those who are already struggling to make it work in Massachusetts. According to a Cornell University study, question 3 would create a new $250 million food tax for consumers here in the Commonwealth. This is a new $250 million regulatory tax that would go to out-of-state producers to subsidize housing for their livestock. To put that $250 million in perspective, we spend less than $150 million in our two largest housing subsidy programs here in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program and state-funded public housing. We spend less than $150 million each year on those two programs combined. This is a $250 million tax in the first year to send to out-of-state producers for them to subsidize housing for their livestock. Question 3 supporters, as you've heard, will tell you that the economic impact of question 3 is a mere penny an egg, while they conveniently seem to overlook some very key factors. And I just wanted to show you, you can go into your local grocery store, and you will see already the price difference between a dozen of conventional eggs and cage-free eggs. This is from my local grocery store out in Eastern Mass, $1.19 for a dozen. Conventional eggs, $3.49 for a dozen of cage-free eggs. The price difference is already there. My opponents will also ignore the fallout that actually happened in California. These are headlines that came out of California when a similar law was passed, and they also conveniently ignore information and data that comes every day in a report from the USDA that it shows that consistently the price of eggs in California are double that than they are across the rest of the country. I can't ignore the facts. I've been doing this work for about 14 years, and I can't ignore the fact that my opponents, and when I say this work, anti-poverty work, social justice work, I came to this work through my own experience with hunger, poverty, and homelessness. That's what drives me. And, you know, it's interesting and quite ironic that the Humane Society of the United States has worked to actually kill a current piece of legislation that would create a livestock care and standards board that would address confinement for all livestock in Massachusetts, not just the 3 animals that they've selected to talk about here in question 3. And my personal experience with poverty and professional work and policy has shown me that when we start to seek out problems that don't exist, and this is a non-issue for Massachusetts, I'll tell you, there's one farm that would be impacted. When we start to solve for problems that don't exist, there will be unintended consequences, and more often than not, poor people will suffer those consequences. My opponents have called me a pawn for big agriculture, and let me make something clear. My work in social injustice, against social injustice, is well documented. If anything, they're looking to you as a pawn in their agenda to further their national agenda. I assure you of that. I am nobody's pawn. They have also suggested that my being here in this debate somehow suggests that low-income people do not care about animals, and that is ludicrous. I am asking Massachusetts voters to vote a resounding no on question 3 because our elders, our disabled, and our struggling families cannot afford a new $250 million food tax. Please vote no on 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Are there questions from the floor? So the question is, and I'll ask you to both come forward, is the increase in taxes going, or just first?
Do you want me to ask?
Nope. Is the increase in taxes ongoing, or just first year to subsidize startup costs?
So to clarify, there is no tax associated with this measure. The Cornell study that's referenced is a study that was funded by opponents to question 3. When you look at the studies that are out there, there are more than a dozen egg industry studies that show that the shift from cages, cruel cages, to cage-free housing is only 1 to 2 pennies an egg. And there is a study out of Iowa, so the middle of pork country, that shows that it can actually be 11% cheaper to use group housing rather than to use these cruel gestation crates where the animals can't turn around. I'm very proud to work for the Humane Society of the United States, and I'm very lucky to work with a very diverse coalition that includes other animal welfare organizations like the MSPCA, but also Dakin Humane Society here in Springfield, the Massachusetts Sierra Club, so many veterinarians, faith leaders, and farmers who know that farm animals deserve to be able to engage in basic movement. Our opponents are funded by the agribusiness industry, which has shown time and time again that they don't care about the welfare of animals, and they also don't care about the safety of families that are threatened by these substandard and unsafe products. My opponent, Diane, has a really tough job. She has to defend what most of us would consider indefensible, which is the lifelong immobilization of animals in cages. So the smart approach is to make people think that this measure is about something that it's not. But this measure is really simple. It's about giving breeding pigs, egg-laying hens, and calves raised for veal enough space to stand up, lie down, turn around, and extend their limbs. It's really that modest.
Thank you. Yes, the $250 million sort of this hidden regulatory tax is in the first year alone, and we can still look to the USDA data from California that still, nearly 2 years later, show that their egg prices remain double that which they are across the rest of the country. And I've actually had the opportunity to visit this one farm that is being vilified just about an hour north of here. There are 3,000 hens, not crammed into cages, as my opponents will have you believe. They are one hen per cage. And when we talk about food safety, I just want to sort of give you a visual. For those that haven't had the opportunity to go and visit a farm, when hens are in cages, their waste, their manure drops below them, okay? They lay an egg, and the egg rolls off to the side. The two do not commingle. So if you want to talk about food safety, after seeing what I've seen, I will never, despite the fact that it's something that me and my family cannot afford, for safety reasons, I'm not purchasing a cage-free egg. I do not want the manure commingling in with the egg that I'm going to consume. And, you know, my opponents will reference the 100 family farms that support Yes on 3. The question 3 is opposed by the Massachusetts Farm Bureau Federation with its 6,000 with their 6,000 members, and the Massachusetts Veterinary Medical Association has also expressed concern because of the impact that question 3 could actually have on the farm animals themselves. And to quickly, I visited with a local farmer in my area who was pressured by some animal rights groups to go cage-free, and he lamented, as he showed me, first of all, a stack of hate mail that was pressuring him to go cage-free. And he said, listen, I can't afford to have picketers and protests outside of my farm where I sell direct to my consumers. And then he showed me a stack of his dead hens. Well, his mortality rate went from 1% to 10 to 15% every year because hens are naturally aggressive and they start to display that natural behavior. There's a thing called the pecking order for a reason. It comes from hens. They don't like each other. They are known to, they at certain times of the season they'll participate. They're cannibalists. So if it's not good for the people, it's a $250 million food tax. It's not good for the hens. It's not good for the farmers. It's not good for Massachusetts. We do not need to be bankrolling the rest of the country to go to cage-free production. Please vote no on 3.
Are there any other questions before we go into questions that came through other means? Well, you've both done such a great job. So here's one question. Please share, each of you, 3 things that we all gathered here tonight need to know. 3 really concisely, so then we're sitting around the table, we're going for our walk and talks with other voters. What do we need to know from both sides of the coin here?
Nice. It's important to know that there are thousands of hens here in Massachusetts that can't spread their wings without touching the sides of their cages, and that across the country and around the world, these animals are crammed into spaces that are so small that they can't turn around or extend their limbs, and that is cruel. If you imagine putting a cat or a dog in those types of circumstances, You know, if one of our endorsing shelters did that, they'd be hauled off because that's cruel and inhumane treatment. It's important to know that Massachusetts families, regardless of their socioeconomic status, deserve protection from these food safety threats that are associated with these cruel cage facilities. And it's important to know that Massachusetts farmers overwhelmingly support this measure, that they're already overwhelmingly doing the right thing. Massachusetts farmers know that responsible farming includes husbandry for these animals, and that that basic husbandry includes allowing the animals to engage in basic movement. And better conditions for farm animals also means better conditions for workers, which is why the United Farm Workers has endorsed this ballot measure.
One, question 3 was intentionally misleading. It is going to ask you, do you want to prevent cruelty to animals? And naturally and instinctively, you want to say yes. There was nothing written in there about this $250 million tax. It was intentionally misleading. 2, this is the money coming to support a yes on 3 vote is coming from outside of our state. It's coming from places like California, New York, and most certainly from special interest groups in DC. And 3, I just want to, there have been, I've struggled in and out of poverty for my entire life, and I think I'm well qualified to speak on behalf of my family and other families like mine. And I know that right now there are families who are not able to feed their children tonight, and that's the truth. And I've been in that situation more times than I choose to even recall, and I've been able to scrounge up $1 worth of change, go to the grocery store, purchase a dozen eggs, and at least be able to provide my children with a source of protein for them to go to sleep on. So, we've got to remember this. We have got to remember the health and safety of families, and we have to reject this $250 million food tax. Thank you. I keep taking your things, I think. Do I? No, you're good?
All right, I got it. Are we on time? Okay. So another question is, what other programs, because if we're talking about the cost that's associated with this piece of legislation, like what programs are there to support farmers or businesses that sign on?
So I believe that ASPCA has some grants to help farms transition from cages to cage-free conditions. But it's important to note that cages, like any other equipment on a farm, has a lifespan. So they depreciate over time. And so the farm in Massachusetts bought their cages, I think about a decade or if not more ago, and they bought them secondhand. So these cages would have to be replaced anyway. And this measure has a phase-in period. It wouldn't take effect until 2022. So there's plenty of time for these cages to depreciate in value and to shift the production method. It's also important to note that already every other egg farmer in Massachusetts is using cage-free conditions or higher welfare standards. This is one farm in Massachusetts that's left doing it. If smaller farms can do it, bigger farms can do it, they certainly can do it as well. And if this is something that McDonald's can do, Taco Bell can do, Walmart can do, this is certainly something that Massachusetts can do. It's important for Massachusetts families to have food that's not only affordable, but responsibly produced.
Sure. So just a note that, first of all, 90% of us at the grocery store are actually purchasing conventional eggs as opposed to cage-free egg, largely due to that cost. And I'm sorry, what was the question itself? The programs. So I think Stephanie covered that. There is only one farm that would be impacted, probably for less than 20% of what the Yes on 3 campaign is spending here in Massachusetts, could have converted that farm. If that farm was the concern, they could have helped that farm out to go cage-free. And then just a couple of other increased costs that haven't been addressed anywhere is the WIC program. Eggs are a huge part of the WIC program. That is a federally funded program, but $12 million is spent by the state here in Massachusetts. What does that mean for the WIC program? Schools that serve eggs, what does that mean for them? Nursing homes that serve eggs? None of this. There has been no cost analysis by the proponents of question 3 on what this actual cost would be. And as you'll hear, they'll downplay the penny an egg. Please vote no on 3.
Thank you. Thank you both. Great passion. Okay, moving right along, I invite Will Luzier, campaign manager at Yes on 4, to tax and regulate marijuana. And you, I believe, are uncontested. So, so this should be fun, Will. So ballot question is just that. It's legalization, regulation, and taxation of marijuana. If voters say yes, Massachusetts will join Colorado, Alaska, Oregon, Washington State, and District of Columbia in legalizing marijuana for recreational use. Will.
Thanks so much, and thanks to the Springfield Public Library and the sponsors for holding this event this evening. So why is it important now to tax and regulate marijuana in Massachusetts? Marijuana prohibition has been an abject failure in controlling marijuana use. There are between 800,000 and 1 million people in Massachusetts that use marijuana on a regular basis, and they are being forced to buy marijuana from a criminal market, and the products are untested. They could have heavy metals, pesticides. There was a gentleman who was arrested in Brockton a couple of weeks ago that was selling marijuana that was spiked with fentanyl, which is a powerful opiate. So what we need to do is take that commerce out of the criminal market and put it in a regulated market that pays taxes, that creates jobs, and drives down youth access. Consistently over 20 years, high school seniors say that it's easy or fairly easy to get marijuana. Most of them say that it's more difficult to get alcohol than it is to get marijuana. And the reason is no one's asking them for their IDs. So we're just as interested as our opponents in making sure that underage folks don't use marijuana. So that's why there's a requirement in the initiative that says no sales to people under the age of 21. That's why there's a requirement in the initiative that says no advertising to people under the age of 21. And we're also just as interested as our opponents in making sure that impaired drivers stay off the roads. We don't care whether they're impaired by alcohol, marijuana, pills, or they haven't slept in 2.5 days. But there are drug recognition experts now that are able to identify folks who have been using marijuana who are impaired by marijuana from a roadside sobriety test, and we believe that by 2017 there will be devices that can be used by police officers to test for marijuana impairment. There was a study that was released by the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts last week that said that if you are Black or Latino in Massachusetts, you're 3.3 times more likely to get arrested for a marijuana offense than if you're white, even though usage rates are relatively the same. You're more than 7 times likely to get arrested for a distribution offense if you're Black or Latino. So what we say is that Blacks and Latinos are getting arrested for selling marijuana to people who are not getting arrested for smoking it. Of course, we decriminalized marijuana by initiative in 2008. In 2012, we instituted medical marijuana, but 4 years later, in 2016, there are only 7 dispensaries open for medical marijuana. So we believe that this initiative will also allow many people who need marijuana for medicine to get it for medicine without the imposition of the Department of Public Health. There are a lot of folks who don't want to go on that Department of Public Health list because they might be veterans who have veterans benefits. They might be federal employees. They might be federal pensioners. They may have a firearms ID card, or they may be undocumented immigrants. For many reasons, they need marijuana for the medicine, but they don't want to go on the list. So this will allow folks to have marijuana for their medicinal purposes. It will establish a Cannabis Control Commission that will be responsible for regulating the cultivation, manufacture, testing, and retail sales of all marijuana and all marijuana products. We just believe that the Yes on 4 makes so much sense that that folks should absolutely vote yes on for in November.
Thank you, Will. Looks like we've got some questions. Oh, thank you. Okay. Lots of interest here. So first question to you and only you, Will, is why are so many police and law enforcement people against legalizing marijuana in our state?
You know, 80 years of propaganda is hard to shed. And, you'd really have to ask the police and the law enforcement folks why they're against it. Maybe it's just because they're against change, but I actually think that it's because they're worried that the statistics that they have, that they compile every year about the number of arrests will go down, and that won't look good when voters come to vote for them the next time. So that's just my own personal opinion, but you'd honestly have to ask the police and law enforcement why they're against it. I think, they're a little bit concerned about the folks who might drive while they're impaired, but impaired driving in the other states that have implemented legalization has not gone up. It's stayed steady. And the Governor Hickenlooper from Colorado has said that folks who smoked before are smoking now, folks who didn't smoke before are not smoking now, and use rates across the board in every demographic except Andrew Friedman, who is the administrator of the marijuana program in Colorado. He said the only demographic that has showed an increase in use of marijuana between pre-legalization and post-legalization is folks over the age of 65.
Given how slow the state went on medical marijuana, how do we know how they will move any faster on this law?
Well, there are two ways. The first is that the initiative says that if the Cannabis Control Commission does not issue licenses by January of 2018, then medical marijuana facilities can begin to sell adult use marijuana. So that's what we call the nuclear option. But also, it's important to remember that this is legislation, albeit legislation, if it passed, that's passed by the voters rather than the legislature. But the legislature can change it at any time. So it's important for everyone who believes that this is the right thing to do to speak to their legislators after this passes, if it does, and we hope that it will, given the fact that you're all going to vote for it. Let your legislators know that you want this initiative protected and not changed in any major way.
Thank you. What guarantees are there to make sure that all the taxes on marijuana will actually go to schools, veteran services, etc., and not just go to the state's general fund?
Well, you can't fashion an initiative in Massachusetts that directs money at any particular program. And so the 6.25% sales tax that will be reaped by this commerce will go to the general fund, and it will be the responsibility of the legislature to decide what to do with that money. The 3.75% excise tax goes to the Marijuana Regulation Fund, which will fund the activities of the Cannabis Control Commission. And then there's also a 2% local option tax that the locality where a retail facility is located can benefit from that 2% tax. So bottom line is there's no way other than asking the legislature to make some sort of an earmarked fund for these monies so that they could go to specific activities that you've mentioned.
Why is the proposed tax vote on marijuana so much lower in states like Colorado?
It's lower than Colorado. Colorado actually lowered their tax a little bit. Oregon is lowering their tax significantly. I think the tax in Oregon now is about 35%. They're lowering it to 17%. But we felt it was important to keep the tax as low as possible because that way you can significantly undercut the black market, and that's one of the main reasons why we've asked for this initiative, is to make sure that the criminal market is undercut, and one way to do that is to keep the tax low. There's also an escalator clause, or a tax adjustment clause, I should say, in the initiative that says that the Cannabis Control Commission on a yearly basis can recommend to the legislature changes in the tax structure. So it could go down or up.
So I support legalization. However, I look forward to the day where nobody carries a criminal record for possession. How does this question help the hundreds of thousands of individuals who currently have a record from a small possession charge from years ago?
And thanks for asking that. In 1970, I was a student activist. I was a hippie. And I think that perhaps because of my activism, I was arrested for possession of less than a quarter of an ounce of marijuana, which at the time in New York State was a Class A misdemeanor. I had some of you in the room are old enough to remember what a film canister looks like. I had a film canister half full of marijuana, and the police stuck their hand in my pocket in order to get it out, so it was an illegal search. But so the case was thrown out, but who knows how my career would have changed if I had had that arrest on my record. In Massachusetts also, you have to be very narrow in your purpose, and we had folks on the drafting committee who were interested in making sure that folks who had criminal records regarding marijuana would have their records expunged or somehow pardoned, and we decided that because it was imperative that we had a very narrow question, that we left that issue for the legislature to deal with after this happens. But I'm a very strong proponent in making sure that those criminal records are dissolved.
Thank you. What measures are to be taken to control availability of edibles and other sources of marijuana that could attract our young people to begin using some form of marijuana?
So there are currently in the DPH regulations requirements that say you can't manufacture or sell anything that looks anything like a commercially available candy. So the Cannabis Control Commission will work from that baseline. The folks in Colorado have been incrementally changing their regulations with regard to edibles. So just this month, October 1st, new regulations went into effect that said any edible has to have a distinctive marking on it that is a diamond with a exclamation point and the letters THC, and it has to be stamped on every portion of a marijuana edible. So this is to allow everyone, including parents, to direct their children to stay away from these kinds of edibles. We're just as, so there's a mandate in the initiative for child-proof packaging. So we're just as interested in making sure that edibles are controlled, but also, you know, there are a lot of folks who want to use smoke-free products. They would like to use marijuana as medicine or recreationally, and they don't want to smoke it. So edibles are an important part of that market, and we believe that we can make sure that all the edibles are marked distinctively so that parents will know not to leave them out. There's already, again, regulation in the DPH regulations that says that any marijuana product has to have large letters that say, keep out of reach of children. But we can't legislate parental responsibility. We have to make sure that parents understand that they need to keep all of their edibles under lock and key and protect their kids. And it's also important to remember there are a lot more poisonings from those little Tide containers that look like candy than there are from children ingesting marijuana.
And how do we know the safe level of THC in marijuana?
Colorado, in that October 1st, those October 1st regulations has mandated that 10 milligrams of THC in any one portion is what's appropriate. Now, there are folks who need more than that THC for their medicine, but all the products will be labeled with their levels of THC and the levels of other active cannabinoids, so you will know what you're getting. And our opponents say, well, marijuana now is much stronger than it was when they used it. And that's probably true. But folks just will self-titrate, just like they do. You can buy 3.2 beer, or you can buy 151 proof alcohol. People, we expect, will be able to responsibly use and know now what levels of THC and the other cannabinoids are in their products and use them responsibly.
Perfect on time.
Thank you so much.
So thank you all for participating so far. This concludes my time at the podium. I am going to call Linda O'Connell forward for ballot question 5.
So I've been encouraged just to take a moment, and I would like to make a brief non-commercial announcement. And that is that I am a representative of the League of Women Voters, newly active here in Springfield. The League is a 96-year-old organization founded in 1920, the year that women got the vote. And indeed, the League is the living legacy of our fight for votes for women. Since then, we adhere so strongly to the idea that our democracy works the very best when we all participate. And so now gender is certainly not an issue for membership in the League. Nothing is an issue for volunteering with the League. You can be a member of the League whether or not you are a United States citizen, as long as you aspire to make democracy work. And everyone over the age of 16 is welcome. So we absolutely are dedicated to voter information, voter education, voter participation, voter enthusiasm, and voter protection. So we have on all of your seats, and also some more on the tables, a couple of things that we do. This vote411.org is a website at which you can do many things, but one of the things that you can do is see a side-by-side comparison of the candidates that are running in your races. Some of you may live in districts where there are contested Senate race. In Hampden County, we have a contested sheriff's, how can I forget sheriff? We have a contested sheriff's race. You will see who those people are, and you can see their answers to our questions side by side. Also, you will see all the ballot questions, and you can make yourself a ballot if you want to remember who you're voting for when you get in there and how you're voting on the ballot issues. On the back of this card, we have a little notice about a texting service that we are offering for early voting in Massachusetts. For the first time in Massachusetts, you will be able to cast your ballot in presidential election up to 11 days before the election with no questions asked. Now, I have to say that our friends who are available for voter registration, come on in, from the Springfield Elections Commission, have absolutely hit it out of the park in terms of encouraging access to the ballot. There will be, every day of the 11 days, 3 different locations in Springfield available for voters to cast ballots, including night hours and weekend hours until midnight, the Friday before the election. Woohoo! So if you would like to get a text from us telling you where those locations are, all three of them, and what hours they are open, what day, so you can get there. Don't wait for your ride not to show up on election day. Don't wait for your kid to get sick and you can't get out. The idea of early voting is no barriers, no reasons, no excuses. Just text Vote 413 to 797979. Tell us where you live. Not all towns are as generous. And we will make sure that you get a quick text announcement every day telling you where you can vote. So thank you for that. I also want to let you know that the Springfield Elections Commission, if you are a more visual person and don't want to do the texting thing, has a list, if you won't lose it, of every place where they will be allowing voters to cast ballots. It's available from them. And from the Secretary of State's office, we have a whole bunch of the red books, in case you did not get one, that have a summary and the complete text of all the statewide ballot issues. So thank you all for making democracy happen. Last thing is, if you would like to be on our mailing list, we have a sign-up sheet over on the table. So now, yes.
We are out tonight just to encourage everyone to go out and vote. As you know, as Linda has forestated, this year we will be having early voting from October 24th to November 4th. And we do have our polling location. We do have our schedule out front, so if anyone is interested, you can pick one up. On the 4th, we will not be open till midnight. We will be open until 4 p.m. So it's going to be our regular business hours. During those 11 days, we will have, at the different polling sites, there's the times, but at City Hall, if you don't want to make it there, City Hall, we're going to have early morning and late evening. So we will be open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So you can come in and cast your vote. And also on that Saturday, we'll be there all day as well. Also, what I want to let everyone know is the deadline, if you haven't registered to vote or you need to change your address, the deadline is October 19th, which is next Wednesday. And our office is also open late till 8 p.m., so you can still do that as well. And you can always check where you need to vote. You can step outside. We can help you figure that out, where you go to vote, so that you're at your correct polling location. And thank you again.
Thank you so much. I don't know where I got that midnight. I was really ready to go out there and vote at 11:30. So thank you. Must be somebody else. So now on to question 5. I would like Ralph Slate, member of the Springfield CP Advocacy, as in Community Preservation Advocacy Ballot Question Committee, and former chairman of the Springfield Historical Commission, to join us, and also Paul Peter Nicolai, attorney and president of Nicolai Law Group, PC, who will be here to discuss the pros and cons, the yeses and no positions for question 5, which is not a statewide initiative, but will be on the Springfield ballot. Briefly summarizing, question 5 regards Springfield's adopting the Community Preservation Act, which is a statewide program that offers funds for historic preservation, recreation, affordable housing, open spaces, and other projects of that nature, which I'm sure we will hear more about. If we vote yes, and our voters adopt the Community Preservation Act, we will essentially be accepting a section of the Massachusetts general laws which will make the city eligible to receive annual distributions from funds that have been allocated through the state, that will be allocated through the statewide Community Preservation Trust Fund, which was established by the Act in the Mass General Laws. What Springfield has decided to do, and will be on our ballot for our approval or disapproval, is we will be authorized, then the city of Springfield will be authorized to levy a 1.5% property tax surcharge with these local funds earmarked for the Community Preservation Act approved types of programs. That would begin on July 1st in 2017. As when we do this, if we do this, then we will be eligible for those other funds. There are some exemptions. There are some opportunities for low-income homeowners, elderly homeowners, and others to there are exemptions that would make this not an onerous tax. Up to the first $100,000 of property taxes would be exempted from the surcharge. The first $100,000 of commercial properties and residential properties, and there are other exemptions. I will leave it to the discussers to tell us what estimates are for what this tax would mean in terms of revenues and in terms of how it would affect the individual homeowners. So with that, may we begin with who? Oh, you're standing up already, so come on and tell us.
Thank you. That's going to be a tough act to follow. I'm kind of just a local guy, not from one of these state groups that's doing these ballot questions. So you may have noticed that we have a fifth question in Springfield. It's the Community Preservation Act. We don't get a lot of press since we're not a statewide question. So what is the Community Preservation Act? It is a program, as our moderator mentioned, that allows communities to create a local fund which would be dedicated to open and recreational spaces, historical resources, and housing. So how would that fund be created? And as was mentioned, there is a surcharge on the property taxes. Now, that sounds awfully scary, 1.5%. The average house in Springfield is $134,806. So that particular property would pay $10 a year more in property taxes, which is about 86 cents per month. So we're not really looking for a large amount of contribution for each individual person. When you put all of that money together, it creates a pot of money that's about $1 million per year. And that could only be used on historic preservation, open and recreational spaces, and housing. So this fund cannot be used to pay raises to employees. It cannot be used to hire additional people in various city departments. It can't be used for the pension fund. It can only be used for historic preservation, open recreation spaces, and community housing. There is a state matching fund, which if anybody has done a deed transaction in the city of Springfield in the past 15 years, they've already paid into this fund. So there's a $20 fee when you buy or sell a property in any community in the state, including Springfield. And if there's a lien that's put on a property in the city, there's a $10 fee. That goes into a pot of money, which is then distributed to the communities that have adopted the Community Preservation Act. So for the past 15 years, Springfield has paid into this fund, or Springfield transactions have paid into this fund, and we've received zero in return for that. So the biggest question, I think, is why? Why should somebody vote for this? Why should somebody want to raise their own taxes? I mean, it seems a little bit crazy. But the reason is that this is going to make Springfield a stronger place. We have a large budget in the city for sure, but things like historic preservation, open space, and community housing are usually low priority items. And people want more police, they want fire protection, and so on, and the pensions do need to be funded. So what we're trying to do here is, and this whole law is designed to create a separate pot of money that cannot be rated for other purposes, which is very tempting for city governments. It can only be used for those three items. So that means that these projects will actually get done. So 161 other communities in the state have adopted the Community Preservation Act. If you look at a map, it'll be like a donut hole around Springfield. The only communities that have not adopted it in this area are Chicopee, Ludlow, and South Hadley and they have it on the ballot, and Holyoke has it on the ballot. So communities like Longmeadow, Wilbraham, East Longmeadow, Belchertown, Westfield, Granby, even Southwick, which is a very, very conservative community, has adopted the Community Preservation Act. What are they doing with their programs? I can give you a few examples. Belchertown built a playground. You know, Belchertown, there's 12,000 people, I think, in Belchertown. They built a playground called Jessica's Boundless Playground. It is beautiful. It is better than any playground that we have in the city of Springfield. It is unbelievable. Ag One built a dog park. Southwick created a spray park. So these are the many things that you can do with the Community Preservation Act. Now, I think my opponent is going to tell us that we can't afford this. But when I hear somebody say that, what I really hear is I hear somebody say we don't deserve this. We don't deserve to be able to put our own money together, to pool our money, and to build things that will benefit our own community. So I think that it is very important for the residents of Springfield to vote for this, to join the 161 other communities in the state that are helping themselves and improving themselves and attracting better residents to the community. And when you have better residents in a community, that means you have fewer problems. When you have somebody that wants to buy the house next door to you rather than an out-of-town landlord from Boston, that is a better outcome. You're going to have a better neighbor than some renter from a landlord who doesn't really care what he does to his property or what the tenants do. So that's really the goal here, is to make Springfield a better place. It's a very small amount of money. We have a website, it's available, and we have some flyers in the back there. If you want to know just how much this is going to affect you, you can look it right up. Thank you very much.
And then, speaking from the no perspective, Mr. Nikolai.
Hi, gang. Thanks for taking time. So, the Community Preservation Act is a tax. And in Springfield, we already pay amongst the highest property tax rates in the state. Higher than practically all towns. I think we're about number 12 in the highest tax rates in the state. Number 2, we are the second poorest population in the state. The only poorer population is Holyoke. Number 3, our property values are $138,000. That's the average median value. That's the second lowest median value in the state. So what we're doing is saying we want a tax for recreation, open spaces, and affordable housing, and history, really, on the second poorest people in the state, because this is a good thing. Now, there's no denying that most of these things are good things. And if you want to support them, like I support them, we send a check. You can send a check to the fund for the bell tower. You can send a check to Develop Springfield. You can send a check to the park department. You can send a check to the Springfield Preservation Trust. There are private organizations that do this stuff now. What the proponents are really saying is that, you know, it's just not high enough priority. We need to do more of it. Well, I'm here to tell you that I believe, like other speakers tonight, that what's more important is to feed our kids, to get them educated, to have safe streets, and what this all started from. Remember, it was passed in 2000. It's 16 years later. Why is it on the ballot now? And the answer is because the city council is having a hissy fit. The hissy fit comes from the Campanile. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they wanted to spend $20 million to rebuild the bell tower next to City Hall. And the problem is that the mayor tried to get the money together from private sources and the federal government, the state government, and Richie Neal and the other people told him, we ain't doing it. This is not a big enough project for us. It's not important enough for the federal government or the state government to spend money on this thing unless Springfield coughs up 10 to 12 million of its own cash. So if you want to put 10 to 12 million of your tax dollars into building the Campanile, then we'll try to find the rest of the money. The mayor doesn't want to do it. He hasn't said anything about doing it, has never sent the order down to City Council to spend the money. The City Council, some members, Fenton primarily, wants this. And so what's really going to happen here is a slush fund of $1.5 billion is going to be created, and they're going to use that slush fund to issue a bond to cover the cost of doing the Campanile, and they'll spend some few bucks out here and there to do other things. But let me tell you, for 20 years, the bulk of this money is going into that Campanile. Now, I know it doesn't say it in the law, and he's never said it, so it must be wrong. And the answer is it isn't. Fenton said it in the newspaper back in May. He wants this because he wants to fix the Campanile, which is okay. In 1909, when they built it, not a bad thing. Now, in 2016, when we're one of the poorest communities in the state, not a high priority. I want to keep my money to spend my money on my kids and my family, just like the rest of us. I don't need to spend $10, $20, $80 a year on these things, which are not essential. I can always just donate the money. The problem here is a question of priority. The mayor has set the priority. That's what we elect him for. There's other people who don't like that priority and want a different priority. And I would tell you that paying taxes, mandating taxes for this is not worth it. It's not appropriate to tell people that they must pay for these things. If they want to, they can just contribute. Thanks.
It goes to other communities who have adopted the Community Preservation Act. Yes, so every time there's a property transfer in any community in the state, including Springfield, there's a $20 fee that goes into the Community Preservation Fund that's administered by the state, and at the end of the year, they distribute that to the communities that have adopted the Community Preservation Act. They have paid into it if they've purchased a property in the past 15 years, but it's not something annual, it's just a one-time thing. So I think we've estimated that it would have been several $1 million that has gone out of the city and has gone into this fund.
So to put that in perspective, what it actually amounts to is about a 20% match. So if the city of Springfield were to raise $1 million, we might expect to get $200,000 from the state, which sounds great. The only problem is that you got to spend $1 million. You got to raise the $1 million to get the $200,000. It's like I said to you, tell you what, if you buy a $20,000 car instead of a $10,000 car, then I'll give you, $4,000 toward that $20,000 car. Well, okay, except that you had to spend $16,000 on a car that you wanted to buy for $10,000. So it's not really a great benefit. If it was a 100% match, maybe it's better, but this is a 20% match.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a little disappointed that Mr. Nicolai characterized this as a fund to fix the Campanile. I can understand why. When the study committee was first formed back in May, Commissioner Fenta, City Councilor Fenta did mention the Campanile. And when we did the research, when we found out just how much money that this would raise, and we talked to people in the neighborhoods, we found that this was not a high priority. So we changed the focus of our study. Now, I guess we didn't send a note to Mr. Nicolai because we didn't know he was an opponent, although maybe we should have assumed that. But there is a process in place. So the way that the funds would be distributed is there is what's called a Community Preservation Committee, and it is made up of members of the Parks Commission, the Historical Commission, the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, the Housing Authority, and up to 4 at-large members who can be appointed by the City Council, so if that's the way they choose to write the law. And so that committee vets the project. So anybody can put in a proposal. An individual citizen can put in a proposal. That's what happened in Agawam when they built their dog park. And the committee vets them and decides which ones should have the right priority. And the nice thing about that is it's a bottom-up process. It's not the top-down administration with its 5-year capital plan, which is what happens in the city. You can't get on the list for 5 years. Projects get funded. City Council ultimately says yes or no if they like the project or not. So there is protection from a group, like for example the mayor, saying we're going to use this money for the Campanile, or even the City Council for saying that, because they're on the tail end of the process. The mayor's not even in on the process, and the City Council only approves what the committee has already voted on.
And that's the point. The mayor is out of it. The City Council, the committee can vote whatever it wants, but the committee can't spend a penny. Only the City Council can spend the money. And when this thing was passed, Fenton said he believes the funds that can be raised from the Community Preservation Act and the synergies that can be built have the ability to be transformative to our city. The Campanile project could be the keynote achievement of the act in Springfield, he said. The tower has been in disrepair for too long, he said. I am sick of driving down 91 and not being able to tell the time on the tower and looking at duct tape on the sides of it. It is time that we get serious about solving this problem. That was the statement he made when he created the study committee that then recommended that this surcharge be added. To now say that, oh, that's not really going to happen is frankly duplicitous.
So the way it works is that you have to allocate 10% of your fund every year to each of those 3 categories. And I would agree, a lot of communities do not go and build an awful lot of affordable housing. In Springfield, I think that there's a greater need, but if you're afraid of affordable housing in Springfield, the one interesting point is that the limits for the housing in Springfield are much higher than what is typically comes with a federal program. So federal programs are usually 30% of median income, 50%, but the CPA allows for 100% of the median income. So for example, in Springfield, a single person could earn up to $47,740, $54,000 for a family of two, and $68,200 for a family of four. So if there was housing built, the income limits are much higher, and that gives a lot more flexibility to the city. Instead of focusing on sort of that 30% number, which is very important, and which we already do, this allows us to build, let's call it more middle income housing for people who are still struggling, but they're not at the very low bottom of the pole.
And the amount for that is $150,000 a year that could be put to that purpose. How many affordable homes do you think you're going to build for $150,000 in a city with 40,000 taxable parcels? It's not like we're Belchertown with a couple thousand taxable parcels, so if you build 2 or 3 houses a year, you've done something. We've got 40,000 parcels, taxable parcels in Springfield. So if we build one, would anybody notice? And should we be taxing the other poor people in town to pay for that? I don't think so. I just don't see the priority here.
So right off the bat, the first $100,000 in property value is exempted automatically. So if you have a $150,000 house, it's as though you have a $50,000 house for the purposes of the calculation. There are also exemptions for low-income seniors. I'm sorry, moderate income seniors and low-income families right now. Let's see if I have the exact. I don't have the exact figures on that, but. The process would be an annual application. So you would go down, and right now there are exemptions currently in the property tax laws for seniors. You would follow the exact same process. It would be an annual application.
How many people are willing to take 2 hours off from whatever they're doing to go down to the assessor's office and fill out an application so that you don't have to pay somewhere between $10 and $80? The exemption is basically a sham. Anybody ever file for a tax abatement in Springfield? Anybody ever try? You know how long it takes? Do you know that they're routinely denied? Then you got to go to state to get an abatement. I mean, the taxing process in Massachusetts is such that they want to get the revenue and keep the revenue. Giving it back in exemptions and abatements is a tough process. So although the rules are there, the fact is that it's so inconvenient and impossible to do that nobody actually does it.